Good morning, folks. I'm sure you've seen last night, as I saw last night when I was on my tea break at work, that we lost the great Dwight Muhammad Qawi at the age of 72 after 5 years of battling dementia. Now, anybody who has been around dementia knows what a horrible, cruel and very unpleasant disease that is, and it destroys the person and it robs them of everything that they were. So I'm sure, although they're incredibly sad, that his loved ones are a bit relieved now because they're not watching him go through that anymore. So, yeah, rest easy, champ. I mean, really, rest in peace. Born in 1953, he became known as the Camden Buzzsaw, and he was a fucking buzzsaw, was Muhammad Qawi. He was born Dwight Braxton, but he would later convert to Islam, and his name would become Dwight Muhammad Qawi. He went to prison early on in his life when he was a young man for armed robbery. Similar kind of origin stories to Bernard Hopkins later on. You know, he went to prison for armed robbery, learned to box in prison, as did Qawi. He learned to box in prison. When he was released, he turned professional in 1978. And in 1981, he beat Matthew Saad Muhammad. He stopped him in the 10th round to win the WBC light heavyweight title. He made a couple of defences. It was Jerry Martin, and he beat Saad Muhammad in a rematch, and then he beat Eddie Davis. He stopped all of them. You know, he was just a if you've never seen Dwight Muhammad Qawi fight, he was just Camden Buzzsaw is the correct nickname for him. He just bombed forward, throwing punches like nobody's business to head and body. He was only a little guy as well. Bearing in mind this is a light heavyweight. He was barely 5'7". He was like 5'6.5" or something like that. Real pit bull of a man. But Christ, this guy was just savage, absolutely savage. Anyway, in 1983, he would lose the WBC light heavyweight title to the WBA champion in a unification. That was Michael Spinks. It was a unanimous decision, but a very, very close unanimous decision. Very, very good fight, very, very close. And he would move up to Cruiserweight eventually. Now, again, it's crazy. You're thinking somebody who's basically 5'6", 6.5", fighting at Cruiserweight, and he would go on to fight at heavyweight. In July 1985, he went to South Africa and he beat Pete Krause. He stopped him in the 11th round. He knocked him out in the 11th round, actually, to win the WBA Cruiserweight title. He would make a successful defence of that. He would knock out Leon Spinks in 6 rounds, becoming, I think he was one of the... There's only a couple of guys I can think of the top of my head who fought both Spinks brothers as professionals, and that was... Larry Holmes is the other one. I can't think of anybody else off the top of my head. If you can think of anybody else who fought both Spinks brothers as professional, let me know. Because I really, off the top of my head, I have to do some research, but off the top of my head, all these notes are off the top of my head that I've made. So if there's anything wrong, please let me know. Yeah, I'm just going off memory here. But he stopped Leon Spinks, and he would lose, I'm just having a quick look down now, July 1986, he would lose the WBA Cruiserweight title to Evander Holyfield in an absolutely fantastic fight, a very underrated fight. He lost it by split decision. This was a fight that took so much out of Holyfield. I mean, Holyfield has said in his autobiography that he thought he was going to die at the end of this fight. He was so dehydrated and beaten up that he ended up with pissing blood. He had kidney issues after the fight, you know. They would meet again later on in 1987, December 1987. Holyfield knocked Qawi out in 4 rounds at this point. And that was it for Qawi's championship run. He would challenge again for the WBA title. He would lose there. He carried on fighting. He moved up to heavyweight in December 1987, March 1988. He fought George Foreman. George Foreman was on his big famous comeback, obviously, and he would be stopped in the 7th by Foreman. But he gave Foreman a hell of a fight. Now you think how big George Foreman was, and a big puncher, massive puncher, and the size and height of the guy, fighting a 5'6.5" buzzsaw at heavyweight, and he stunned Foreman a couple of times in that fight. He really, really did. Again, there's another underrated little heavyweight slugfest that I would recommend anybody watch. George Foreman against Dwight Muhammad Qawi. Qawi would fight on mixed results here and there until 1998, where he lost to Tony La Rosa, unanimous decision over 8 rounds. He would retire then. With his final professional record was 41 wins, 25 knockouts, 11 losses and 1 draw. Just an absolute warrior. Very, very underrated. He kind of forgot, again, he's another one of these people sort of forget about him, and he was an absolutely fucking fantastic fighter. Just a absolute warrior. That's the only word I can think of, an absolute warrior. And it's a shame we've lost him, you know. But like I say, with dementia, anybody out there who's dealt with dementia, I've dealt with dementia, I'm dealing with it now, my grandfather's got it. And it just fucking destroys the human being. It robs them of everything that they were and they are, and they have no dignity left. And at least he's not going through that anymore, and his family aren't dealing with that anymore. So, you know, there is that. So, yeah, like I say, this is just notes just scratched together off the top of my head from memory. So if you've noticed there's anything wrong, what I've said, or I've got dates slightly wrong, or result or the chronology wrong, let me know. I'm pretty sure I'm pretty correct, but you know, just let me know. As I say, it was just off the top of my head, scratched together when I got home from work this morning. So anyway, folks, it's a shame we've lost him, but let's try and remember him. If you've got time, watch a couple of his fights to remember the man and honour the man. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon.